So originally I'm from, well, rather a small town in America, Bloomington, Indiana. Probably not a town that's super famous to most people in Japan, but I think our most famous thing is Indiana University. My research is relatively, well, lately it's been relatively fundamental, but broadly speaking, what I'm interested in doing is basically constructing materials that contain really, really tiny holes, or really tiny pores, so to speak. And these tiny pores, okay, when we make them the size of small molecules, then they can selectively interact with these molecules or separate these molecules or grab onto specific molecules in a mixture. And I think that my research is interested in building sorts of materials, particularly with a view towards chemical separations, where we can take problematic molecules like CO2 in our atmosphere or contaminants in our water supplies and extract those from the places where they're unwanted, using these very, very small channels. And so, that would be the very surface level introduction. I think from the time I was a child, really, like chemistry and science classes to me always seemed a bit like kind of potions in Harry Potter. It was like the closest thing I could get to real life magic. And so ever since I was a little kid, I always really enjoyed my science classes. And I think that for chemistry in particular, I mean, maybe it's a bit of a mundane story that, some other people can relate to, but I had a really good teacher in my high school chemistry classes. Ms. Hill, or now Mrs. Adams, so thank you. But she really, was outstanding and kind of showed me how to fall in love with chemistry in a sense. And yeah, ever since then, just kind of my career took off in that direction. That's a very good question. And I think there's a couple of reasons. I think first and foremost is the faculty. As I mentioned a bit previously, Sato Sensei in the field that I work in porous crystals is really, I think, a world leader and just doing some incredibly creative science. And so, being able to work with him and learn from him was, an incredibly attractive opportunity for me. And more than that, I think that, being in a WPI institute, so I was in one previously in Kyoto as well, is really, I think, the best working environment for, scientists from abroad who want to come to Japan and work. You have an incredible support system. You've got, access to people from a lot of different countries. You can experience a lot of different cultures. People are really kind. And also, of course, everything's in English. It makes it a bit easier, right? If you're coming here as a foreigner, and there's staff that can help you, for all of your kind of life needs. And one other thing I should mention, I guess, right, is that WPI institutes, are inherently interdisciplinary. And so you pull a lot of people from different fields. And so I think that as an environment to sort of establish new scientific collaborations, really there's no better place within kind of the Japanese academic system. And SKCM², right, is quite an interesting concept. Knotted chiral metamatter. It's not something you hear every day, right? And I had to look it up a bit on the website once I first looked into the institute, right? But I think that in the case of porous materials, if you can create, like my field of research, for instance, right, if you can incorporate some of these sorts of designed entanglements, so to speak, into materials, you have the opportunity to access new properties, flexibility or design degradation in ways that conventional materials are not going to behave. And so I think it's really a kind of a fascinating concept for research, and being a part of an institute that brings all of these disciplines together with kind of varying levels of expertise or varying areas of expertise in this topic. Yeah, it's really an ideal environment to pursue those sorts of projects, I think. I've thought about this a bit before I came here, right? And knots, in the case of chemistry, right, building molecular knots actually is quite synthetically challenging. And so there's still aspects of these sorts of projects I'm unsure about, to be honest. But I think that, the promise of being able to incorporate these sorts of motifs into the types of materials I'm interested in, I think there's, possibility to access a lot of functions that are difficult to achieve in kind of the current state of the art. So yeah, let's see what I can what I can do here over the next few years. I don't know. Yes. I think that for me, the environment, the earth, is our most precious resource, right? And I think that protecting that is all of our responsibility. And I think that, you asked me in the beginning of this interview why I'm interested in chemistry, and I think chemistry, and other disciplines of science as well, all represented here in SKCM², have the potential to, really contribute to a more sustainable future, which is, I think, one of our, most critical responsibilities, as humans living on this earth. Yeah, my story with Japan is quite an interesting one. When I was in high school, right, when I started high school, I had to pick a foreign language to study. And my options, I think, were Spanish, French, German, Latin, or Japanese. And at the time, actually, I didn't have such a strong interest in Japan or Japanese or anything, but my older sister, who came before me, she took a Japanese class, and she said, the teacher's really great, you should really try it, it's gonna be fun. So I signed up for this class, right? And to be honest, it was fine for the first 2 years. But at the end of my second year of high school, I had the chance to visit Japan with the class for the very first time. And it was like seeing a different world for me. I think, Japanese society is quite different from American society. And I was really impressed with the country as a whole, right? Everything's super clean, people are super polite. And the transportation is phenomenal, the food's amazing. Like I really fell in love with the place, and so ever since then I always wanted to come back to Japan. And when I was a college student, right, I had the opportunity in my third year of undergrad, or at the end of it, to do an internship in the University of Tokyo for 2 months with Professor Mitsuhiko Shinoya, working in his research lab at the University of Tokyo. And that experience really opened my eyes to the research possibilities in Japan. And so, not only is this a country that I really enjoy spending time in, but also I think there's really great career opportunities here. And so basically, ever since that internship, I always told myself, one of these days, I want to try living in Japan for a longer term. And that opportunity came for me once I finished my PhD. It's funny, when I was a high school student, I never think that this is going to be super important in my life, but really, out of all the classes I took, right, I think about my chemistry classes, my Japanese classes, have really made the biggest impact on my life. So John Sensei, if she happens to be watching this, thank you for encouraging me in high school to continue to pursue Japanese. Being able to join a group that exposes you to so many different languages and cultures and traditions, and ways of thinking, not only about culture, but also about science, right, was a really incredible experience. And I think that, it was really like my family when I came to Kyoto. Because when I came to Kyoto, I hardly know anyone there, right? But the Furukawa group, they really brought me in, and we go out to dinner. I think some of my most fond memories, right, are just kind of going to, out to dinner or out to lunch with my lab mates, and just kind of, having fun, making some casual conversations. And my lab mates also became my travel partners, right? Like a few of them, went with me, actually came to Hiroshima Prefecture to do the Shimanami Kaido cycle. I think, some of those trips and those bonding experiences we had are really precious memories for me. For anyone, I think, who has ever wanted to, try doing research in Japan, maybe you're feeling a little bit nervous about, oh my gosh, I can't speak Japanese well, or maybe I can't speak Japanese at all. Maybe there's, no place for me here. I think that the WPI institutes can really give you a great entry point into Japan. In some cases, there's a bit of a misconception that if you're a foreigner and you want to come to Japan, the only thing you do is teach English. But that's really not true. I mean, there's, if you're interested in science, right, or you want, to pursue a different career path, there's opportunities in universities here. There's opportunities for research if you've already graduated from university, and I think there really are fulfilling career opportunities, if you want them. And so I would encourage, anyone who has an interest in coming to Japan to, have a look at the WPI. Seriously, they're really great places to work. In terms of building a community in Japan, if you're a part of an institute like a WPI, that immediately gives you a network of friends who, can also speak English or, many other languages in other cases, right? And so from the time that you start, you already kind of have a community that's sort of lined up for you. But the longer that you live here, right, you're gonna have opportunities to learn, some Japanese as well. And, the more that you learn, the more you can expand that network. You can start getting involved in some community organizations. I was involved in a language exchange community in Kyoto University, which was kind of how I started really improving my Japanese speaking abilities, and I've made some really amazing friends through that. And so you can absolutely make friends here. I think there's a bit of a misconception that Japan is totally closed off or you're gonna have so much trouble making friends, but I've made really amazing friends here, and you really can too, right? It's just open your mind to some new perspectives, and bye-bye.